Good afternoon, everybody. I hope we're doing fantastically well, and welcome back to the Will Be Games YouTube channel, where today we're going to be looking forward to match day 2 of the UEFA Champions League fantasy football game. And this is going to be one of two videos this week. This video, we're going to be concentrating on if you were going to play the Limitless this week. The other video that will be coming out alongside this video this week will be looking at a wildcard draft for that chip strategy. So I feel like match day 2 is a big part of starting to think about your chips, and there'll be a lot of chips activated this week. My preferred method, I think, at the minute would be go to Limitless in match day 2 and then wildcard going into match day 3, because then you've got 3 and 4 where you can greatly benefit from those fixtures. But also I quite like the wildcard to set up for 2, 3, 4 and possibly even 5. So I think I'm currently edging towards the Limitless in 2 currently. So that is what we're going to be looking at on the video today. Before we jump straight into it, I appreciate everyone for the views and interactions you had on the previous video, especially the UCL videos did very well. Just a reminder to please subscribe and like the videos, it really helps, and it's completely free and it just helps the channel to grow and get noticed. So I appreciate that, and we'll jump straight into the fixtures to talk about. So as you can see, we've got the fixtures up on the screen here. Just firstly, before we look at some potential draft team, I want to highlight the fixtures. So we're focusing on Limitless here. So just on this 1 week, so you just need to take these fixtures at face value and just think of these. Don't even think any further into it. So starting from the very top on the Tuesday, I think, as we tend to say on UCL Fantasy, these two games at the start of the game, it can be massive in terms of we will know the lineups completely of who are going to play in this game. So this will definitely change our mind on assets from these teams. So when I look at these first two fixtures, Sporting against Spurs and Poulsen against Inter Milan, looking at those fixtures, I think Sporting away from home is quite difficult. So Spurs, I'm tempted to have one asset, maybe go out there and throw a second one in there, depending on how you feel about Spurs' chances there. But I think Spurs, it's going to be difficult for them this season, the first season in Europe for quite some time. But they have got a decent group. But I feel like, especially in the Champions League, when you're coming back into this kind of competition, those away games are notoriously quite hard. So I'm not backing a strong performance there from Spurs. I think they could edge a win like 2-1 or 2-0. But I'm not seeing big points return. So I think my current draft, if I was on a Limitless, would probably have Son in there. I'm not sure I'd go further than that. But it's nice to have one option in the Spurs team in case they do get off in that game, because there is a possibility still. But what more intrigues me about this set of fixtures is this Inter away at Poulsen. Obviously, it's away from home. There's a bit of doubt there. But for me, this is the team that I want 3 assets from for Inter Milan. So I'll set up with 3 assets in my team that I will be planning to go with. If there's tweaks to the lineup, which we will see, I will swap those players out. I'm currently going heavy on the defensive from Inter Milan in hope that even some attacking fullbacks will get a return, but mainly looking for the clean sheet there. So for me, that's a standout one, and I will be aiming to triple up on Inter Milan in hope that preferably they'll get a clean sheet, but I also expect them to score quite a few goals. But it's quite difficult to pin down the attacking options from Inter Milan. And when you compare it, the fact that we're on a Limitless, this could be an option if you was on a wildcard to go for some cheaper Inter Milan options. But the fact we're on a Limitless and you've got like PSG attackers who've got a great fixture that we'll talk about, Inter Milan's attack isn't as appealing to me. So we could come down the rest of the fixtures here. Rangers against Napoli, I think it's going to be a very difficult game, so I'm going to be ignoring that completely from a Limitless point of view. This Porto-Bruges match, if you want to sneak a Porto player in there, maybe, but I wouldn't be going more than one. They didn't do particularly too bad in the first game, but it doesn't really jump out at me there. I think I might have considered one in the Limitless. Leverkusen Atletico, I'm not a big fan of. Atletico just don't score many goals. They can give a clean sheet, but the fact they're away from home isn't a go for me on the Limitless. Bayern Barca could go anyway. I suppose both teams will probably score in that, so it's another avoid from me on that fixture for the Limitless. Marseille, I wouldn't mind one or maybe 2 options for Marseille. They don't particularly jump out at me on the face of that fixture. They're quite a difficult fixture, but again, if you're trying to fill a few places in midfield, I'm trying to back the home teams more often than not. So Porto and Marseille if you want the odd player, say if you've got 3 or 4 teams that you're tripling up on, and you want to get the odd few option from those teams, I don't mind it. Quite similar with Liverpool, because I think Ajax obviously can score, they can do quite well in that game, but at Anfield, the European night, you expect Liverpool to do quite well. So, like a Salah or something, I would definitely not be against, and especially when you're a limitless and you can have all that money to spend, I think it's a good option to go for there. So there's a few fixtures on the first night to go for. I think the spread of the fixtures this week is a bit more enticing than we've seen before, so that is interesting to see. So then we move on to the Wednesday. We've got Milan here against Dinamo Zagreb, which for me is one of the big target fixtures again. The fact that Milan are at home, we touched on up here, that some of the nicer fixtures, like for Spurs and Inter Milan, are away from home. But the fact that AC Milan is at home, I'm feeling like it's going to be another triple up for me on AC Milan there. So that's the big one to target for me. I'd be totally ignoring this Donetsk against Celtic game. Not for me. Chelsea, originally I had no one in my draft. I currently don't have anyone from Chelsea in my draft because I was a bit unsure on how they will perform. Changing manager and they weren't performing particularly well beforehand, so just a hint towards the draft, I've got no Chelsea players in there. But there are one that I'm definitely considering now on the change of manager. Bear in mind, guys, this video, we're talking about a point in time where all the Premier League games have been called off this week, so no English teams are currently planned to play at the weekend, and I'm recording this on the Saturday, so as far as I'm aware, no one will play over the weekend. I don't think there's much doubt over the European fixtures going ahead, but it's just something to watch out for if you go for like a Spurs, Chelsea, Liverpool asset, or Man City, of course. Just to watch out in case there's any kind of postponement or anything around these games. I think it's highly unlikely because it's based on the competition's decision, so UEFA would have to make the decision. And as we've seen in the UK as well, there's been a lot of other sports going on, so I'd expect there to be no issues really with those games to go ahead. I think if anyone was not going to go ahead, it might be this Chelsea game, the fact that it's in London and they're at home, but just one to look out for. And because of the manager situation with Chelsea at the point in time when I built this draft, wasn't 100% on them, but I could be tempted to put in a few defensive assets. I tried that last week in Matchday 1, but that didn't particularly go well with them conceding, of course. We moved down to Real Madrid and Leipzig. It's a difficult one, this again, because I've not hardly been impressed with Real Madrid, and they're not great starters in the Champions League notoriously. I feel like they've been getting the job done a lot this season. So when it comes to a limitless, Leipzig didn't have a strong first match, so you might be tempted to go on one Real Madrid, but I feel like Leipzig can still easily score. So for me, it's a hesitant avoid that fixture. But if we move on to Man City and Dortmund, I feel like Man City at home, they dominate a lot of teams. So Man City, as with most of the match days throughout this tournament, are what a team to target. So we'll touch on the certain City players that I would target in the draft as we move on to that. Dortmund, not away from home at City for me. It's an avoid for a limitless. Talking of avoids, Juve, Benfica for me, be quite a close game. Benfica are notoriously good at home, but the fact they're away, I won't be going for them. And Juve just don't excite me with their options. But then we've got two fixtures at the bottom here that kind of draw my attention slightly. The bottom fixture, of course, PSG away from home against, you could argue, the whipping boys in the Champions League. So for me, triple PSG, a lot of my attackers in my draft will be coming from PSG. I think that's another team to treble upon. I'm looking at Seville here because historically Seville have done very well in European competition, but their form this season has been pretty atrocious. I'm pretty sure if I'm looking at their results, they've not won a game yet, and they've picked up probably 2 draws and then lost every other game. So I'm tempted, very similar to I mentioned, Porto and a few other teams up above. I don't mind one asset from their team because they're away at Copenhagen, but more than one asset isn't for me. But you'll see when we get to the draft that there's a few options that I think I'd go for. I think it's mainly midfield for Sevilla, should I say, in terms of Gomez and possibly Isco, which I completely forgot I'd even played for Seville until the Matchday 1. Alright, so let's go back up and I'll give you an indication on the kind of team that I'm looking at for a limitless. So as you can see here on screen, this is the kind of team, and this is obviously not set in stone with the teams, but it kind of focuses on the teams and certain players from those teams that we should be targeting. Let me just scroll down a bit there so you can see it past my face. That would help. There we go. So you can see in attack, I mentioned heavy on the PSG attack. They've been scoring goals for fun this season, so I'm tempted very much to go for the Mbappe and Neymar double up there. You could, of course, throw in there Messi. Mbappe got the goals in Matchday 1, and Neymar has got ridiculous amount of goals in the league. So for me, it's those two at the minute that I'll be targeting. There's also other options you could use up front there. For example, Haaland at said City has got a decent fixture at home where they're always strong. And if we just touch on the other forward we've got in the team, as you can see down here, well, you cannot see until I let you see it. We've gone from Leao for AC Milan. As again, for me, I'd argue theirs are probably the best fixture. The fact they're at home this game week. Leao has been performing pretty well in the league. Obviously, the first week for Milan, not the best result, but away from home. You'd expect a turn of fortunes against, I think, quite clearly the most, well, Chelsea might say otherwise, but Dinamo Zagreb should really be the whipping boys of this group. So AC Milan at home, it should be their one that they need to get 3 points from. So while we're on the AC Milan options, we'll talk about Theo Hernandez as well. So I've got him in the team. I'm strongly backing the AC Milan clean sheet. Well, I say strongly, we've only got one defender, but I fancy them to keep a clean sheet. So, not well. The fact that Theo Hernandez is also a wing back, he's not got a great lot of returns this season, but fancy him to get a return, maybe two. If Giroud is not on the pitch, he's also the backup penalty taker, so he could also get returns there. And we've also got a third AC Milan option, which could be quite a few players. If you look at AC Milan midfield, there's a few options you could go for, but there's none that really stand out for me. I was looking at these two options here, which doesn't matter in terms of value. You've got, okay, I cannot pronounce his name, Di Calaterara, and the guy we've got in here that do not know how to pronounce that name. But I feel like an AC Milan player in this slot would be a decent little option, even if you're going to go on wildcard this week, is a decent option to go for as well, because price range, and it gives you a nice mix of prices in there. So we touched on all the AC Milan players there. While we were talking about PSG, we've also got Hakimi in there, who got an assist in the first game. Again, easy fixture away from home, so I've gone for two at the front and then one at the back. So I'd be quite confident PSG will keep the clean sheet. So Hakimi is in there for me. But yeah, you could even, I was even tempted to go Messi up front as a third attacker, but I think that was too much. And I don't see much value in PSG in the midfield. There's a lot more attacking midfielders you can go for. So we touch on that midfield. I'm currently lined up with Mo Salah. So we said about potential Liverpool option, the fact European night Anfield, it's just can be huge upside in that, especially if the crowd get behind him. Obviously he's on penalties, as we know from other fantasy games. Keeping on the other high-end options, I've currently got KDB in here instead of Haaland currently, but that was more to facilitate getting Neymar and Mbappe in here. You could easily go for Haaland instead of Leao here if you fancy that. But the Man City fixture is more difficult than some others, so I was hesitant to go for Haaland as well, especially with that PSG fixture, but it could easily make a change out, take Edison out as this goalkeeper here, and then put someone else in and put Haaland in. I would not be objected to that. And you've got Son in here, as we mentioned, they're the early game of the game week alongside Inter Milan, so I highly expect Son will start, especially with the games being called off in the Premier League this weekend, so shouldn't be any issue with fitness. I'd expect Son to feature, and the fact that he's away from home might get some space in behind on the counter attack, so I think I'd favour Son there. And we've also got a lot of force up front, so midfield options, we can get some nice options in there. And I mentioned about Seville earlier. Seville, not great form, but pedigree in Europe and away to Copenhagen, which you'd back them to get a win. I don't expect a lot of goals in that game, but if you're looking for another option in midfield, I quite like a Seville option. I think it'll be Gomez or Isco. I've currently got Gomez in there because Isco hasn't played as much football over the last few years, but I know he has been creating quite a lot for Seville. So that kind of rounds off the midfield. Just touch on the other options we had on the bench. Obviously, Cancelo had a fantastic game. Match day, should I say, in the previous week. So I think the City bit might be where I change to a Chelsea asset. So Dortmund could easily score, so I'm tempted to either go like a Reece James or Mendy in goal, so I haven't got a double up on defence, and that could also allow me to get Haaland in for Rafael Leao. So that's probably the main consideration I've got to make there. Then if we look at the missing pieces in defence and goalkeepers, so we touched on Inter Milan earlier. If we look down here, again, there's two matches, them and Spurs, both the first matches of the game week. So I'm definitely going to go triple Inter Milan. I'm currently tempted to go triple on defence, as you can see. I've got Dumfries, Gosens and Onana. Onana is currently playing because of injury, I'm pretty sure, to Inter Milan's first goalkeeper. So just, especially with Inter Milan, these three players, you could get a rotation at fullback with Dumfries and Gosens. So definitely Inter Milan, even you can check Son as well, but I'd back Son to start. Inter Milan is a big one that we need to check for this game week to see who's started. But for me, this is how I would be lining up along these lines for a Limitless. So we just take a look at the dates as well, how these fall. The reason I picked these goalkeepers originally is because it's got a good rotation between them, and across the rest of the team, there's not a bad spread. Could argue we need a few more players on the 13th, which we could look towards, but we've got the Inter Milan kind of going for the full out defence here, so that might be as much risk as we want to take. And we've got Son and Salah. Might maybe want to get another midfielder in. I think Gomez and an AC Milan midfielder, we might just want to change to someone who plays on the 13th. But this just gives you a good idea and a good framework to start off your limitless draft. So I think that covers a lot of the main teams that we want to target. And obviously, looking at this draft gives you an idea of a lot of the players. So for now, guys, I think that gives us a good overview. And if you've got any questions or other options that you feel would be beneficial for everyone to get into their Matchday 2 teams, please feel free to comment and ask me questions below. No issue with that at all. So this, like I mentioned, this is looking towards a Limitless in Matchday 2. We're going to have a quick look at a wildcard in the next video as well. So the wildcard, in my opinion, would be looking forward to like a Matchday 2, 3, 4, bit of a longer term view, but this would just be looking just at the Limitless. So basically a free hit with unlimited funds for this game week. So that is kind of how I'd be lining up, guys. There you go, just to have a fan look at a team. Mbappe, Neymar, KDB, Son, then either AC Milan midfielder, Seville midfielder, then you've got Salah, got 3 Inter Milan defensive assets, 1 goalkeeper, 2 defenders, Hakimi from PSG, then we've got 2 City defensive assets, Ederson and Cancelo. One of those might change to a Chelsea player, and then 2 other AC Milan players in Theo Hernandez and Leao. So for me, guys, that is the kind of structure I'm looking at and teams I'm targeting. Let me know what your thoughts below, and as I said at the start of the video, subscribe and like the video. It would be really appreciated, and they're completely free. But for now, we will see you on the next video, which should be the wildcard one, as we've discussed. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.